Mai ka puka ana ka la I hae hae, a hiki ke kau ana o ka la I ke one a lohi lohi o holani ku. Aloha pumehana kākou. Mahalo no ke ia launa pu ana o kākou I ke ia la. Nui ko u hauoli a pihoihoi e ho ike a ho'omohala I ko kākou mo olelo I ke ia alahula aina momona. Oia ho'i ke ala imi na au o ko kākou mau kupuna. Aloha mai kākou. My name is Kanoe Morishige. Mahalo nui for that beautiful oli, those beautiful oli and this great introduction. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to share my journey with you all. I'm just part of a collective of communities of Aina Momona on this journey of Aina Momona and headed towards a future that our ʻŌiwi communities determine. So today I'm here to share with you the journey of centering ʻŌiwi communities in fisheries research, weaving knowledge systems to cultivate Aina Momona. O ke kahua mamua, mohope ke kokulu. This olelo no eao really symbolizes what I feel is best to start this presentation. You need this first foundation to be laid first. You need the foundation to be laid first, and then you build, yeah? So mahalo I na kupuna, na aumakua, na aina, na kupuna me na kaiaulu. No ko lako a'o ana mai ia'u I ke ia ala imi na auau. So just want to mahalo all the kupuna, aumakua, kupuna communities that have taught me so much, that continue to teach me, and that I move with alongside in this work that we're doing. And the work that we do today to transform these Western systems to serve our communities and serve our lahui and head towards this path of Aina Momona is only possible because of the work that they've done to lay that foundation. So I thank them today and all days. Mahalo to all of the communities, of course, and kupuna ohana, from the keikis to the makuas to the kupuna, to my kumu that have taken me into communities. Mahalo to the aina of ke kahawai ole, to Hilo, where I first met the group that I'm working with today and beyond. To the kupuna, Auntie Lei Leitner, Auntie Ku'ulei Keakealani, the Limuhui, Uncle Wally, Auntie Pam, and everyone that continues to teach me to this day. I wouldn't be who I am today without their guidance and their support. And again, these are just some pictures of, this is a collective journey that doesn't just represent myself, but is part of this collective movement as we move on this journey together of Aina Momona. So Aina Momona, healthy and thriving communities of people and place. If you break down the word Aina, it's Ai Ana, yeah? It's everything that feeds us, mind, body, and soul, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And this is a path that we travel, and alahula, Aina Momona, alahula means a path well traveled, yeah? That's a path traveled by our kupuna, led by our kupuna, and that we follow today in a changing time. And this presentation, a lot of it has to do with looking at Aina Momona and sharing with you about this journey that we've been on and how kilo is our process, understanding the drivers of production and health. So again, this Aina Momona relationship that we have as Kanaka ʻŌiwi, that we have as lahui, whether you're Kanaka ʻŌiwi or you're not, you drink the waters of this place, you eat from this place, we have a collective kuleana to care for it in the way that it cares for us, yeah? So this Aina Momona relationship is to feed in reciprocity. That's its traditional role. This relationship to Aina, that we take care of it in the way that it takes care of us. We feed from it, we feed it physically, mentally, spiritually, and all those different dimensions. And so Aina Momona, this Aina Momona relationship is our purpose, it's our why, and it's how we're serving communities on this path collectively. So re-envisioning fisheries research and management through ʻŌiwi relationships, transforming management goals towards understanding drivers of production and regeneration. Because our knowledge and practices aren't just something of the past. The knowledge system that made those practices, that shaped those practices and that knowledge is something that we carry with us and continue today. That's not something in the past. Our past informs our present and our future. So knowledge and practices are products of this Aina Momona relationship. And I first wanted to step back and just orient us to ko Hawaii pai Aina. This Aina Momona relationship drives our behaviors, our practices, our beliefs, in all of what we do in Ao, where most of us live, in Ao, in the realm of light and the living. And we also have this Aina Momona relationship to pole, which is where most of Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Sanctuary is, our northwestern Hawaiian islands. We know as our Kupuna Islands and our Aina Akua, the realm of our gods. It's where our kupuna return to in spirit. It's where our islands return to the ocean in which they were born. And I'm very thankful. Part of my journey today has been working alongside and serving the Papahanaumokuakea Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group, where I'm able to better understand our ʻŌiwi relationships to our ocean. And that looks differently in ao and po. So there's many challenges in fisheries management. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is just to kind of highlight certain aspects of it. So one of the challenges is this narrow definition of success. Yeah, what is, in a Western system, what does success look like in fisheries management? And oftentimes it's abundance, it's biomass, it's these quantitative models that tell us what the maximum sustainable yield should be, how much can people fish before they crash the fishery to ensure that the crash doesn't occur. But that's a narrow different definition of success. Yeah, we just went over Aina Momona. The success in our ʻŌiwi Aina Momona relationship is much more holistic. Yeah, it's not just about seeing plenty fish, plenty healthy corals. It's about the health and productivity of our communities of people in place, a relationship fundamentally between people and nature. And who best knows how to caretake Moananui Akea than the original stewards, yeah, the Kia'i Aina, Kanako ʻiwi, and our cousins of Moananui Akea. So success needs, those definitions of success need to be more holistic. And within these challenges, there's also ʻŌiwi voices and experiences are often undervalued. Don't need to explain that further. Lack of recognition of ʻŌiwi science as a form of science. I think we're past the days of comparing Western science and Indigenous science. We know that they're both forms of science. The West does not own the word science. Our kupuna are scientists inherently. They were, they are, and we're continuing those practices using the tools that we have to adapt to a changing time and different, society that we live in today. And lastly, harvest. One of the challenges is that harvest is assumed as the cause for a lot of issues and problems that we have in fisheries management. Yeah, so overfishing is often, I've been in conservation circles for a long time now, and sometimes the finger is quick to blame fishermen. Yeah, you don't see a lot of fish here, or opihi, or this and that. Well, it's because the fishermen are overfishing it. And I don't think that's fair because it's only one of the factors. It is a factor, but there's so many other factors that we need to address. And this is the perfect audience that understands that, yeah. So before we dive into it, I just wanted to share this quote by James Speth. And I think it really speaks to this bigger transformation. Yeah, we're not just looking at doing the best science that we can, best available science in those technical terms. And I wanted to share this with you all today. I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. So this is really powerful, right? We're looking at, I just went to Debbie Naweta's Packer's talk, and she describes Indigenous people as forever people. Indigenous people have forever solutions, yeah? So we're not just working towards sustainability, like these Western words of sustainability. That's something that is gonna come from Aina Momona and productive systems and communities of people in place. But that doesn't cover the whole transformation that we're trying to support, and these systems that were never built for our people to thrive, for our knowledge systems to be equally valued. So there's a bigger transformation at play now, that I'm just one person doing one small thing, and we're collectively a part of that. A lot of our ʻŌiwi communities here in Hawaii and our kazis across Moananui Akea, as well as other Indigenous people across the world. Yeah, it's gonna take this bigger transformation. So definitions and measures of success matter, yeah? That's one of the challenges. So abundance, the idea of abundance versus production. When we think about Aina, it's this reciprocal feeding and the tending to people in place. It's feeding our people. It's feeding Aina in all different ways. And it's the product of the innovation of our kupuna. It's their legacy that they pass on to us, yeah? And so we don't just want abundance. we're looking at Aina Momona. We want Aina Momona to become not only our journey, but our realities. And that's productive and healthy communities of people in place, where abundance is a byproduct of that. And it's reorienting our goals, not only in fisheries management, but this up and coming biocultural restoration. This is all embedded in this bigger movement. Iola oi, iola kako. It's important to include all the different layers of Aina Momona in defining what that success looks like for our communities, for our keiki and their future keiki to be able to not only eat opihi, but do everything that we can to ensure that they can continue and their mo'opuna can continue to eat opihi and to carry on these relationships across time. So the success of a productive system demands that abundance and biodiversity succeed too. So it's not saying that abundance and biodiversity are not part of the goals. They're byproducts. If they succeed, they're succeeding because we have a productive system, yeah? And people and our communities, our ʻŌiwi communities are centered within those solutions. So I first started my journey as an undergraduate at UH Hilo. I was a Hawaiian Studies and Marine Science double major, feeling lost in the Marine Science department as a Kanaka ʻŌiwi up and coming, scientist, and meeting other Kanaka ʻŌiwi Pacific Islanders and locals. And we wanted to do research in a way that would serve community. We wanted to research where we could weave our ike kupuna, our ancestral knowledge, in with tools of Western science. And so this was the fundamental question that we kind of started with. How do we understand our oceans so intimately that our actions support Aina Momona? And this continues to be that driving question for us today. So centering our ʻŌiwi communities, there's a lot of great examples, or there's a few great examples today that are products of decades of work that our ʻŌiwi communities, our local communities have been working on for a long time. And that's Kulana Noi'i, and that's also Maikapomai here. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's available online. But Maikapomai is a Native Hawaiian plan. It's a guidance document that's born from over 20 years of Native Hawaiian communities gathering within the cultural working group, being consulting communities across the Pai'aina to really look at how do we want to care for Papahana Mokuakea? How do we want to set this standard and set guidance for the 7 state, federal co-management agencies that are charged to take care of this place? And so it represents in the full aspect of why Papahana Mokuakea looks like what it is today, where nature and culture are one, yeah? From the very beginning, 20 plus years ago, our ʻŌiwi leaders and our kupuna, including Uncle Buzzy Agard, Auntie Laura Thompson, and many more that have been a part of building this into the foundation of co-management of Papahana Mokuakea. And I'm very humbled for the time I spent taking care of the Native Hawaiian program within NOAA to really look at what we do today and how Papahana Mokuakea looks like would not be possible without embedding ʻŌiwi engagement, knowledge systems, values, and practices in collaboration with the CWG as the foundation of co-management. Yeah, it's not just something you sprinkle on co-management and you call it a day. This is something that's a product of decades of work, talking about how you continue to weave ʻŌiwi knowledge systems, values, and practices in every aspect of co-management, from education to research to policy to operations and beyond. So I believe that this is a great example for us to even look at, even for the Holomua initiative. So I just wanted to shine light on that today. So multiple ways of knowing and tools to transform best practices. So it's really important to build this pilina and trust in co-management partnerships. We know that Papahana Mokuakea is a great example of that, and why it's possible to take care of the place through protections that are worthy of our Aina Akua. It's also important to weave knowledge systems of finding ways to experiment, test, and monitor the impacts of management strategies that I'll cover later on in the presentation in some of our intertidal work. And then those last 2 bullet points, right? We can't forget that Aina Momona is also that succession plan that we have for our future generations to continue to step into roles that are impactful in decision-making and not just performative and not just tokenized, but growing their skills so that they can move through mentorship from the community and they can rise into positions where they can continue to affect change and transform the system. So today I'm here to share with you more about this Kilo journey. Kilo is an ʻŌiwi methodology and inquiry process. Yeah, they're keen observations. That's kind of the general description, keen observations made over time. But really what this is an indigenous science process, yeah? So an ʻŌiwi inquiry process that begins with a question, that's guided by observations, leads to hypotheses and actions and decisions. And it's a continuous iterative cycle, and that doesn't end in just one place, but continues to inform us, allows us to adjust our questions, and to dive deeper into what Aina is trying to teach us and what our communities have to teach us as well. And Kilo is more than just looking at things. Yeah, it's not just, oh, make observations over here and there. This is a lifestyle that we're collectively trying to embody and to become a part of, yeah? So Kilo Lawai'a, in their traditional role, was to not only make observations of the ocean, but to understand the weather patterns, the seasons, observing to decide where to fish today, taking their actions, confirming results, informing the konohiki about the right decisions to make when they're putting kapu on certain species. So it's much more than just observing this one thing over time. Kilo Hoku, there's not just observing the stars, yeah? They played a prominent advisory role to pay attention to the seasonal shifts of our heavens, of our atmosphere, our weather patterns, what's happening on land and in the ocean, and understanding the cues for those big transitional shifts when we're entering into makahiki season, which we are now. So huli'ia is a Kilo methodology that we've developed over time under the leadership of Namaka Onauna. Pilika Andrade has been leading a lot of our work with huli'ia. Huli'ia is just one Kilo methodology, and it's centered around every place has a story, yeah? It's moving, and again, moving past comparisons of Western science and indigenous science. I think we've talked about that a lot. Huli'ia is an inclusive way to encourage the collaboration of tools. And as one of my mentors, my kumu, Dr. Kaleinu Uhiva, puts, it's not about changing people's minds, yeah? It's about opening up our minds to different ways of knowing. And huli'ia is a great way to do that. It's expanding our Aina literacy. So every place has a story. We just need to remember how to listen again. And it challenges the idea that data must only be quantitative, because we know that's not true. So it's a journey of remembering how to listen, yeah? Who are our storytellers? Paying attention to the world around us. I'm gonna go into kind of the process of huli'ia, but this is in general. Our storytellers is everything around us. Yes, the kupuna that surround us every day, the clouds, the temperature, rain, the plants, the i'a, everything holistically, from the lani to the honua to the kai. It's not just about presence, absence. Yeah, Kilo is the driver of, not only what we're seeing, but why are we seeing it? And why are we not seeing it? And what are the drivers of that? Is it because we're only down at that place for one time or a few times of the year and we miss that one limu? And we cannot say that, oh, we don't see that limu because of this thing, because we're down there one time and it wasn't there. So huli'ia is a way for us to lock into the continuous mo'olelo of place, yeah, to pay attention to a place over time, to be present and to pay attention. In this day and age, we gotta fight harder than ever, yeah, when we have all this social media and technology and all these things that disconnect us. Learning from the communities who do it best across our Pai'aina, being present and paying attention, because we can be present in a place, but it doesn't mean that we're paying attention. So letting Aina contribute to the narrative, yeah. So we have a data sheet that I'm about to show you in a few slides. And so recording these observations as communities, as a hui, is one way that we keep this record, but the real goal is to build our collective capacity to be aware, to listen, to remember, to internalize, analyze, and process the stories of place that are being shared with us over time. And it comes down to building pilina to people in place and sharing observations and learning from the mo'olelo and the people who live closest to this Aina. It's understanding the cycles of place. Yeah, these are some pictures from Kalaimano, which is in Ka'upulehu on Hawaii Island. And that's where we started our intertidal research journey. And these are pictures, of course, over time. But what huli'ia taught us is to be present and to pay attention all the time. not just when we need to go down and be extractive and just collect data, only go there when the conditions are good, where we can do our surveys and this and that. The biggest lessons that we've learned as Kalaimano is our kumu, is that going down to the place over time allows us to see, and committing to that long pilina building process allowed us to see the hi'ohi'ona, the different aspects of what Aina is expressing, what Aina has to share. And that has to do with the cycles of health and productivity. 10 years ago, when we would ask people, okay, which picture do you think is showing a healthy ecosystem? And a lot of people would say March and May, because uluwehi o ke kai, because plenty limu, it looks lush, and June and October look kind of not as lush. But what's important is that Huli'ia taught us, for 2 years, we went down every month. And this is when we were all going to Hilo. Some of us live Hilo and Mea Kona. But for 2 years, every month, we would go to Kalaimano. And what Kalaimano taught us and Huli'ia taught us is that health can look differently over time. In ʻŌiwi worldview, we have dualities, yeah? We have lush season, the wet season, we got the dry season. And these seasonal changes encompass these cycles of health, yeah? It's not just going down and seeing in June and October and being like, oh, this place is unhealthy. It doesn't have a lot of limu, it's unhealthy, it's suffering. Because actually this place, Kalaimano, is in Ke Kahavai Ole. And to me, it's one of the most, it's a great example of the resilient lands, oceans, and people that come from a place, vai oleya, no vai, but actually there's choke vai, you just can't see it. It's coming out of the ground, it's groundwater. So we really got to rethink the way that we think about health and productivity. Okay, so this is a data sheet, Huli'ia data sheet. You can't really see it, but no worries, I'll kind of explain. So we break it down, those rows that are colored, that's Lani on the top, which is our heavens, our weather patterns, our sunrises, sunset, constellations, our wind, our storm patterns. Honua, that second row, colored row, that's everything terrestrial, what's happening on Earth, everything that we're seeing from birds to pigs to flowering to fruiting, the plants dying back, growing in abundance, things like that. And then Kai is that last one. And we have some areas where we talk about Vai too. And it's broken down in the columns is by Hawaiian month, and then split is the 2 Hawaiian season, Ho'oilo, our wet season, and then Kauvela, our dry season. So again, it's not just about the written record, yeah. It's about communities coming together to share their observations over time, and through that, you build your memory, yeah. If I didn't recognize one manu that somebody saw, I'm gonna remember that for next time, and then I'll pay attention to it. And then that manu, and that hopefully you learn that, Hawaii, the Hawaiian name, that becomes part of our consciousness, and that's something you pay attention to that you wouldn't have if you didn't share space in Huli'ia and in Kilo. And so this is just a quick example of Huli'ia observations over time from the Ha'ena community. And so over time, you start to kind of see the dominant patterns of Aina, yeah? Like what really comes through, there's all these mea kaulana of each particular Aina and community, things that these areas are known for, and a lot of changes that our Aina has been through. So sometimes, we're not just paying attention to the native species, you're paying attention to the non-native species as well. That are flowering and fruiting, and we're adapting to the changing times today. So in the bold, you'll start to see those dominant patterns come through. This time of the year, shoreline smells like limu, large limu kohu patches, and even weaving in tools of Western science, yeah, looking at the fish gonads, identifying spawning seasons. So it's inviting the weaving of knowledge systems and the tools to collaborate on how to listen to Aina, yeah. Turning Mana'olana into Mana'o'i'o. A lot of our work has been building our Na Kilo Aina programs, supporting and building communities of Kilo, from Kailapa and Kauai High to Kiholo to Ka'upulehu, and then on to Kauai and Ha'ena. And Pelika's been leading a lot of the work in collaboration with Emily Cadiz, with Hui Maka'ainana o Makana. So all of this is, the purpose of it is to bring people back onto Aina, to get into the kai, get into the streams, to engage in the everyday practices of our Aloha Aina communities that are out there doing the work, so that we're not just reading about these things in a book, but we're actually on Aina and we understand, for example, Pa'akai on the right picture. Kalaimano is famous for these poho Pa'akai, natural kind of salt basins. So if we weren't able to learn or consistently going to Kalaimano, we wouldn't understand when is the right time to pick pa'akai or to collect it, to ohi it. Because it's within a window is a good time, but with our changing temperatures and our longer seasons, shorter seasons, there's a sweet spot of the timing of when that pa'akai is good to collect, dry enough, but not sitting long enough where there's all this bacteria growing onto it. So what do these practices look like when we're in these changing times, And so working alongside communities has been the greatest part of becoming a better ʻŌiwi scientist. And I learn from them every day, and I feel very humbled for these opportunities. Yes, communities continue to be my kumu, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without them. And weaving knowledge systems, going into intertidal work soon, but it's also Nakilo Aina engages, in stream work and using the tools of Western science, looking at the gonads of Opihi and A'ama and looking at Limu and looking at these Aina systems holistically. One of the products of Huli'ia has been seasonal calendars. On the left in blue is Holaniku, a seasonal calendar for Curie Atoll, which is the farthest island in the Northwest, our Kupuna Islands. Holaniku, there's a field crew that works out there, and in collaboration with Namaka Onauna, our nonprofit, and many other partners, UHC Grant, DLNR, and beyond, they've been able to create a seasonal calendar. And on the right is Kalaimano, a calendar that we put together for Kalaimano and Ka'upulehu, capturing those dominant patterns, that we see through time, throughout the months, the imagery, and also Olalo Hawaii, which is an important part of remembering, and being able to compose new Olalo no Eau that are vessels of this environmental data, this data that will hopefully carry on to continue to show us how interconnected our systems are, and really embed the data that we have through Huli'ia, through Kilo. And these are examples of some of them. Olaniku also partnered with Olalo Hawaii experts that were able to look through these observations over time and developed new Olalo no Eau for Holaniku. And there's probably no other place that you can observe Aina in that kind of intimate way. You're very isolated. It's like probably the most isolated part of Hawaii Pai Aina, where these field crews, there's like 5 of them out there for 7 to 9 months. So the things that they witness and the seasonal shifts that they see are brought to light through these kind of collaborations, and these new Olalo no Eau. So are we really doing what we set out to accomplish? These are questions that we ask ourselves in the Huli'ia process. We're paying attention, but what does that mean for reestablishing, strengthening our Aina Momona relationship, our relationship to Aina, and everything that feeds us? And how do we feed Aina? How do we let it regenerate in ways that our kupuna knew how to do? And this brings up tough conversations sometimes when we talk about best practices versus good practices. Fishing for the freezer. Can Aina support the amount of i'a that are being taken out and put in our freezers? For our pa'inas, baby first party, high school graduation party, things like that. When they're in the freezer, they're not able to reproduce in the ocean. So that's a conversation. That's sometimes tough to have. Even size versus reproduction. Our kupuna ate small fish sometimes. Oama is one of them. And so when we think about the Western tools for fisheries management, we really got to kind of decolonize. Our kupuna knew to protect the big ones, but sometimes they harvested the small ones, but that's because the Aina could support that. So there's certain situations where we need to relook at how we're setting these kind of size limits, minimum size limits that maybe allow for taking of the largest ones, but protect the small ones. I'll get into that later. And then taking only what you need versus can the Aina sustain taking only what you need? When you're taking only what you need, but then there's hundreds of other people taking what they need in that same day, that same week, that same month. So there's all these other kind of social drivers, cultural drivers that should be a part of this kind of conversation. Are these practices, can Aina sustain these practices? And that's kind of what we pose and what we try to discuss more. Okay, so this Aina Momona framework, this upena represents the way that our intertidal research, our Nakilo Aina, our path on Aina Momona is cohesive with all these different components. So perpetuating ʻŌiwi knowledge systems, our Nakilo Aina programs and Kaiaulu being integral parts of the work that we do and the things that we learn. The mo'olelo that our communities continue to share, coming together to prepare food together, to have these week-long camps and to meet the ohana and to learn from them. And then pairing that with huli'ia, and then again, our community-based intertidal monitoring that we've been doing. And this work represents the last 16 years of this journey, all leading to Aina Momona, all for community, by the community, and wanting to support them in various ways. Okay, so this is gonna get kind of nerdy. I probably have too many slides, but I will try to adjust depending on how much time we have left. Okay, so Opihi and Ha'ukeuke, our work started in the intertidal shoreline, yeah, where the ocean meets the land, specifically our wave-dominated intertidal systems, where these male olokai, these species survive and thrive, yeah. So Opihi on the left are limpets, they're endemic, they're vertically stratified in different habitat zones in the intertidal. Makaiuli, that top one, lives the highest. Alina, that middle picture, oh, I don't know if I can, oh, there we go. Middle picture usually lives in the wave zone on the CCA, which we know as limuko'a, crustose coralline algae. And then we have the ko'ele, the biggest one. They grow to the biggest sizes and they live subtidally sometimes, well, all the time actually in the water unless it's rough months and they come up. And then they have different sexes, yeah, male, female. And they're also really important keystone grazers. So when we look at a balanced and a productive intertidal ecosystem, grazers are important, yeah, to keep the limu line down, to keep space open for the recruitment of the baby Opihi and Ha'ukeuke. What I wanted to share today is that our kilo process is woven throughout our whole journey. Yeah, it's not just like a component of what we do. Kilo is what drove this entire research process. And we pulled in tools of Western science to better look at the whole community and the system. So it started honestly by doing, by being out in the shoreline, doing huli'ia. We started to do transects, but then we learned the Hawaiian names of all the different species that we saw. And so I'm talking about where like our eyeballs were on the rocks, looking at these pipipi koleas that live really high up with the makaiuli. So this was a part of our opening up our world, yeah, to understanding the function of these species. You cannot understand Opihi and Ha'ukeuke if you don't understand their community and the habitat and the environment they live in. And the same thing, learning the Hawaiian names for limu. And a lot of this has come from looking at Kamauli Iona's thesis that he did. He's from Hana, and he did kupuna interviews. So a lot of these names we're re-remembering, yeah. And working with the limu hui and Uncle Wally, Auntie Pam guys, and all the communities that are gathered under the malu of limu hui to learn these Hawaiian names, to use them, to ho'ola them, to give them life. And to look at working with the limu hui to create IDs that are based on ʻŌiwi worldview, yeah, their habitat, where they're found, not necessarily if they're red, green, or brown limu. Okay, life history. Ha'ukeuke and Opihi, they're broadcast spawners. And what that means is they synchronize their reproduction to release their gametes into the ocean. They eventually develop into larvae. Spend like 2 weeks to a month out in the ocean, and then hopefully they're able to make it back on to the rocks as recruits. And sometimes they're as small as a grain of rice over here, Opihi. And we have a collaborator, Dr. Anthony Mao, who is able to look at their larval development too. So all of these things are within our inquiry process. We started out by learning the standard research methodologies, 10 years of community-based monitoring, starting in Kalaimano, in Ka'upulehu. We did huli'ia, we did many belt transect surveys, looking at intertidal community diversity, habitat. We also paired that with looking at spawning seasons, so gonad somatic indices, GSI, measured a lot of Opihi shells, and then did rapid assessments. And so the belt transects and the gonad study rapid assessments, we all learned this from Dr. Chris Bird, who was a postdoc here at UH at the time. And so we dove into what those methodologies were telling us. However, we started to really question, okay, what is this all leading towards, yeah? Is the end of the road just gonna always be one solution of a permanent no-take area, and we're just monitoring inside and outside? And we know that if you protect a place, it'll be, you'll see a lot of abundance in it. Or if we're looking at Aina Momona, how do we look at what this information is telling us about behavior changes of sustainable harvesting that can include rest areas, but in a way where we can rotate and we can continue to feed from these places, yeah. And that's what helped us kind of hit the reset button. And we're very fortunate to be able to work across different shorelines, in different shorelines across the Pai'aina, doing trainings, workshops, and think tanks from Kauai to Hawaii Island to Ko'olave at certain times. And then there was one Kauvela one summer where we were able to run a field school. I believe it was with high school and some college students, starting on Hawaii Island, different shorelines along West Hawaii, and then jumping to Kauai. And then we got to go to Papahanaumokuakea that summer. And we had all these light bulb moments of, okay, we're counting OPE, but why are we doing it? And what are the other factors we got to pay attention to? Yeah. Is this research getting us to Aina Momona? Is it allowing us to understand how to adjust our behaviors to ensure that Aina can thrive and be productive in the long term? So then we switch gears and we realize that we need to be looking at habitat and environmental drivers. Yeah, everything is place-based. Our kupuna had hundreds of names for winds and rains. And so everything, especially intertidal, it's so variable that we need to understand habitat and the environment that they're in and how this environment is changing across the seasons. So yesterday's considerations and then today's. So what does a productive shoreline look like? What's the carrying capacity for OPE populations, depending on where they are? Are they windward? Are they leeward? What kind of habitat do they live in on the shorelines that our communities are trying to malama and kia'i? Is it mostly papa, mostly boulder, poly? All these things matter. So we shifted gears and created this productivity and carrying capacity survey, developing a sustainable fisheries model. And it's based on looking at this carrying capacity based on habitat. The long-term goal is to create adaptive management strategies that include sustainable harvesting and rest to complement the cycles of place, to allow it to regenerate, but still be able to harvest from them. Because these are really fast-growing species that we should be able to continue to feed from if we just manage our behavior, not necessarily the resource. So many different considerations I'm going to kind of go through. Not all shorelines are created equal. Different habitats carry different types of OPE populations. Sometimes there's plenty big ones, plenty small ones. There's a lot of turnover in northwest facing polys, when the winter swells come through, things like that. We also got to consider seasonal habitat growth and shrinkage, that limu ko'a, that CCA. Sometimes it dies back. And so our populations are changing seasonally. There's a growth and then there's shrinkage. So we want to understand over time, what does that maximum population growth look like? And then what does that minimum look like? Because if we want to really realistically look at sustainable harvesting, we got to set that sustainable harvesting according to the minimum threshold of that population, yeah? And then windward and leeward is important consideration. Wave impact gradients are especially important as well. You're not going to see as many OPE on kind of sheltered bay areas because they love the nalus. And so that needs to be considered when our communities perhaps want to create OPE rest areas, intertidal management areas. These are things to consider, along with other factors as well. Salinity and maximum sizes you find in each area, and sunlight exposure is another one. So pictured on the right, this is at Makana, and this is in Aina that hui maka'ainana o Makana tends to, cares for, and we've learned a lot from working with this community over time and building pilina. And one of the lessons learned was that, so this is a northwest facing poly on Kauai, and certain times of the year, the sun doesn't hit some of the lo'i that are closest to the poly. And so because they're not getting that light source and it's not productive, they fallow those lo'i, yeah? So that was kind of an aha moment in our mind, because when we go to Papahanaumokuakea, one of the places that we've been monitoring is along this northwest poly the bottom left, 1,000+ foot pulley. And every time we go there, you can see a little picture on the top. Small opihi, not too much limu. And then it made us think, okay, yeah, sunlight, right? Limu needs sunlight. And if limu growth is limited there, you're not gonna see massive amounts of opihi, big sizes. But then you go around the corner into Hanakai'ie Bay, which is around that point. And then there's more papa habitat. Yeah, you see bigger opihi, there's kaheka, there's tide pools, there's more limu, and you see a completely different kind of carrying capacity for opihi. So then it made us think, okay, so how do we use this to better understand and to be able to go to a community and look at carrying capacity based on place, yeah? So yes, there's surveys and sizing and all the things. Okay, and so a lot of this I'm gonna kind of run through quickly, so sorry, we're running out of time. But I'm just, gonna cover our major findings, and this is a continuous, process, research project. So size matters, when we look at fisheries, we're not only looking at the density of opihi, the number of opihi per meter squared, you need to understand the biomass, So you might have plenty small ones, but that doesn't mean that's the same as plenty big ones, or a lot of big ones and some small ones. So that's pretty straightforward, size matters. This is a picture from Ononui, which is it's the last basalt island going into Papahanaumokuakea. So when you look at this picture, is this abundant or is it productive? So that's a question that we've asked ourselves, that we ask everybody. And sometimes people say, it's abundant and productive, or it's abundant. So what we want to show here is that there's so many opihi, they're growing on each other, they're eating on the limu on their backs. There's space limited. You don't see a lot of space where new baby opihi can come in and settle. So when we think about a productive system, we got to think about the space, for new genes to enter the population. God forbid something comes through, like a genetic disease or something, that can wipe out this gene pool because it's not as diverse as it could be. And this is, of course, Papahanaumokuakea, but this is how we learn from Papahanaumokuakea, a place with minimal, kanaka impact. Ononui and Onuiki, some more images. And then sometimes there's plenty limu and choke opihi at the top line. But then we start to question, what's the role? What's the role of ha'ukeuke? Right? Ha'ukeuke and opihi work together. Opihi, they're like micro grazers. They can graze the turf limu, but together with ha'ukeuke are urchins, helmet urchin, and they can eat macroalgae. So they keep down the big limu and opihi keep down the small. They keep space open. It's a garden in a lot of ways. And so their role is important. And that's something our communities have in Ao. If we were to look at these kind of robust and productive ecosystems, we need ha'ukeuke as well. And so Lalo is also this rock island in the Lalo complex. There's a lot of atolls around it, but oftentimes we see only the adult, the makua opihi, and not so much of the small ones. So it just has to do with, gene flow and habitat available space. We looked at reproductive potential. Long story short, we got to protect the biggest reproducers. These are opihi centimeter size classes, not to scale, but just for, to show the different sizes. The legal harvest size for opihi is 1.25 inches. But we know that reproduction increases exponentially. This is the gonad weight of opihi, and the larger they get, the more they can exponentially produce a lot more. So the state minimum size allows the harvest of the biggest opihi, which are the biggest reproducers. And then you factor in that these 3 opihi have different life histories. Makaiuli and Alinalina, the biggest reproducers are around 4 centimeters to about 6 centimeters, but ko'ele get much bigger and they take longer to reach size of reproduction. So their biggest reproducers are from like 6 to 8 centimeters. And then kind of breeze through this, but this is part of my dissertation where I wanted to kind of look at environmental factors a little bit further, looking at opihi, ha'ukeuke, and limu. This is kind of what I did, but I'm only going to focus on the reproductive side of things for today. But what we found is that everything varies by place. Seasons are different for every place. And that has to do with wave seasonal wave regimes, yeah, depending on what side of the island and the waves that you get, it can affect these populations and their reproduction differently. So opihi and ha'okiuki reproduce twice a year, but the timing varies, and that's tricky, right? How do you set a management strategy that, you know, they could spawn during this window, but who knows if it's going to be a successful event. Makaiuli spawn at peak spawn at one time, but then alina lina spawn in another month, and then it's a little bit offset. And there are potential effects of temperature and wave energy on these cycles. So in general, the reproductive season for ha'okiuke and opihi are from October through May. And this just shows you, I did some histology work to look at, you know, if they're because the GSI studies give you a proportion of the opihi or ha'okiuke that are reproductive, but it doesn't show you on this cellular level, are the gonads actually in a reproductive state? Are they ready to spawn? Are they momona? And so it's important to identify, because what we found is that in June and July, they had gonads, but they weren't mature. So they're spawning, 2 peaks spawning from October through May, maybe 1 peak spawn in December. And then in January, it's the proportion of mature females is super low. That indicates that they spawned out. They can build it up again and have maybe another partial spawn here, and then it dips down, and then they don't reproduce in June and July, similar to alina lina. So why is that important? Yeah, when we look at GSI as a tool for community monitoring, it's really great to look at peak reproduction when it peaks and then when it drops. But sometimes it doesn't tell us the difference between a gonad that's not reproductive and a gonad that is. And that's important because at least for ha'okiuki in the summer months, it's the hottest month. So they might be momona, but sometimes of the year our communities eat ha'okiuki and it has the gonad in it, but it tastes bitter. And part of their biology is, and the theory is that in the summer months, it gets really hot, and that's really stressful for something that lives, you know, an urchin that lives out of water or in the wave zone. So they might not reproduce during that time because they're just trying to malama themselves, and they use that gonad tissue for energy. And warmer, you know, lower proportion of female ha'okiuke in warmer temperatures, and the same relationship for wave energy. So if we're thinking about climate change, yeah, if it's about to get hotter, it is getting hotter, and if we see like these wave events, seasonal wave events that are more intense, storm events and things like that, that can affect their cycles, and it's something to continue to look at. And we see the same thing for the female ha'okiuke. It's really messy. Yeah? There wasn't a clear pattern that we found in the dissertation, but at least for looking at sea surface temperature and female GSI, it drops pretty rapidly once you reach a certain temperature, about 26.5 degrees Celsius. So hot temperatures might be really stressful for them because they're already in a stressful environment. It's hot. And when you crank up the heat, that can stop their reproduction, and that's something to keep in mind. So long story short, protect the largest opihi. Closed spawning seasons by itself are not necessarily going to be effective because they don't capture that monthly variability. You know, they could reproduce within a time frame, but then that can vary between years. And habitat matters. So at the end of the day, our hui kind of got together and was like, okay, what does this mean for management? Place-based rotational rest and sustainable harvest areas, yeah, will help to create productive and regenerative intertidal ecosystems. And this has led to, we've been working in partnership with Ka'upulehu and the Hui Kahuvai, which was formerly the Ka'upulehu Marine Life Advisory Committee. And they have this tri-weight area. It's a rest area of the intertidal and the coastal area to protect their fisheries. Let it regenerate for 10 years, and then it opens up in July of next year, in which they'll implement the sustainable fisheries plan. And they've adopted our opihi management plan, and we've been in conversation with them in regarding certain aspects that they want to tweak, adding bag limits and things like that. But in general, this is rotational rest areas, part of the shoreline for 5 years, 5-year cycles. Yeah, part of the shoreline will be a rest area. The other part will be sustainable harvest. We know that the middle sizes are the most abundant. So creating size slot limits that protects the largest reproducers. and allowing a potential specialty harvest to happen in the rest area. And then after the 5 years, it rotates. So the rest area becomes sustainable harvesting. But there's so many other factors that Hui Kahuvai is also considering as well in terms of enforcement, compliance of people, because we could set rules, but are people going to follow them? So this is an ongoing conversation. I'm going to skip that. But yeah, I just wanted to end with that. These are important aspects of the process. Having Indigenous communities included in mentorship and the research process, and building values-based approaches to working with communities today. This is Auntie Lei Leitner. She's amazing. She's one of the kupuna that has been a major supporter for us, and we've learned so much from her over time. It's also about this succession of pilina or relationships and the kuleana that finds us, that identifies us. We don't identify kuleana. Kuleana identifies us. So this collective of trying to build this succession of leadership in service of our communities, building capacity of the next generation in our Nakilo Aina camps, weaving knowledge systems and building our pilina to Aina, that being the context of the research that we're doing. And it wasn't about the Opihi research, it was about supporting this collective movement and shift to build communities of Kilo. And to uplift our youth and our generation to look at how leadership can help all of us realize our roles and our contributions in Aina Momona and the kuleana that we carry in that. And that this journey is a bigger journey to heal our relationships to place, to bring us together, to learn what our gifts are, our kuleana, and our role in the Aina Momona journey. So just wanted to mahalo all of these partners here. There's many, many more community members not listed here, but this wouldn't have been possible to do without everyone coming together on this journey. So mahalo nui kakoa po. And if you have any ninau, we can talk story maybe outside. So sorry, it took up most of the time. But yes, mahalo for having me.